Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and today I'm going to be talking about the newly released mobile version of EVE Online, EVE Echoes, and giving you a rundown on its features, how it differs from the PC version, and of course, my opinion on it. But before we dive into that, I do have to make the disclaimer that this video is sponsored by NetEase, the creators of the app, which is why this video doesn't have any ads. So if you end up deciding to try out the game for yourself, please hit the link in the description below to do so in order to let them know that I sent you. So those of you who've been following this channel since before I hit 10,000 subscribers will remember that I covered this game in its beta state and had a lot of enthusiasm for it, but also raised a few issues, mostly around the UI, balance, and a few features that I felt were important not having been ported over. And I'm happy to say that most of these things have been addressed, with the UI in particular being a source of improvement, as the game handles much better with a minimised overview than it did before, as combat targets are now always displayed on the top right of your screen, regardless of if you've locked them or not, which means that you don't have to sacrifice half of your screen real estate in order to just know who's around you. The overview also now has a few more filters, so you can quickly check what is and isn't in a system whilst travelling through it, and basically it just works like a simplified version of the UI that we all know and tolerate from the main EVE game. My only real complaint is that we can't see transversal, velocity, and other things that impact damage application, but I do recognise that there's pretty limited space to put that. A coloured ring around your targets indicating hit chance would probably be the best way of representing that information, but right now, as most players are still in frigates and destroyers, it's not a huge issue. Balance has also come a long way, with the extreme kite meta based around drones and missiles being nerfed, making turret ships a lot more viable than they were previously, as combat between frigates and destroyers now typically takes place within around 10 kilometers, so scram and web range. PvP action is still typically centered around gate camps or base anomalies, which level up and offer better rewards if not run, which gives players an incentive to both live in and protect their space, and other players an incentive to run into defended space and try and snag the goodies that other people have been waiting for. Right now though, the meta is relatively ill-defined, with no ship being clearly the best for PvP or PvE, although drone ships do have an advantage by virtue of having the highest total DPS, and the rats not currently shooting their drones. But given that the devs have indicated that there's going to be balance patches in the near future, I'd suggest just flying whatever you think looks coolest right now. For me, that happens to be the Galante ships. The biggest thing that's changed though is the sheer number of people that are actually playing the game. In the beta, 100 to 200 people was normally the max that you'd see in any particular system with the exception of Jitter. Currently, most of the regional hubs sit at 400 to 500 players, even at weird times of the day, and low-sec and null-sec systems are also surprisingly populated, which can lead to competition for anomalies and makes mining ore out there a nerve-wracking experience. There's also a much more detailed tutorial and a later progression system which encourages you to try out all the different parts of the game, kind of like a more freeform version of the tutorial agents that used to be the core of EVE's new player experience. And you shouldn't skip all of this even if you are a veteran, as it brings with it a ton of rewards that'll help you quickly get into the game. The one thing that hasn't changed though is the lack of a D-scan function, or anything similar that would allow you to see across grids, and thus spot other players coming, or hunt them down. And given that there can be upwards of 20 belts and anomalies to warp to in a system, this makes it much more challenging to engage in the non-consensual PvP that EVE is really known for. To some of you, I'm sure that's a positive, but as someone who tends to focus on that aspect of the game, I hope that something's in the pipeline to help make PvP a little easier to engage with. Although, given that Rain and Suetonia have already picked up several kills, the problem might be less with the game and more with me being bad at it. So, that's everything that I touched on in my last video, but what can you actually do in the game? The answer is quite a lot, with almost all of EVE Online's core playstyles being represented. You have a structured PvE system that's similar to mission running called Encounters, where you can pick from a list of different scenarios to pew your way through, without being directly tied to an agent, allowing you to do content for all of the main 4 factions. These encounters also then build up into storyline missions, which are more difficult but carry greater rewards in storyline modules. There's also a more freeform PvE system that runs parallel to this, based around running cosmic anomalies that should be fairly familiar to EVE veterans. Just warp in, start shooting, and collect loot and bounties. These anomalies can be either small, medium, or large, which refers to the amount of waves you'll face, and levels 1 through 10, which refers to the difficulty in completing it. Unlike EVE, however, the cosmic anomalies that spawn in a system are not static, with rarer sites occasionally popping up to replace the standard ones. From the base anomalies, which can give you faction loot if you let them level up, to the scout anomalies, which hold data cores, blueprints, and other rare industry items at their end. This encourages you to not stay in one system and run around every once in a while to try and grab them up before anyone else can. Mining is present in an almost unmodified state, although it'll be a few weeks before the first mining barges make an appearance in the game, as they haven't been built yet, meaning that all mining is currently being done by ventures and asteroid belts, which is just adorable. That said, the resource system for T1 ships is a lot more complicated than the base game, as it also incorporates a passive system based around planetary interaction, which generate their own materials over time, and then need to be launched off-world and taken back to wherever you're set up. As these launch points are static, and the best planets are mostly in nullsec or lowsec, you'll want to be careful though, as not only can someone be there to shoot you when you try and pick it up, they can also steal what you are hoping to pick up whilst it's launching. Now, I haven't dug too deep into the industry aspect of the game just yet, but it seems to function in a similar way to the main game as well, with the exception that there's no equivalent to BPOs, meaning that all blueprints are consumed during production, and there's no way to research them to make them better. As such, you'll need to actively trade with PvE players who find them out in rare spawns, or craft them yourself using the reverse engineering mechanic, which allows you to turn salvage into new blueprints. If you happen to be a space trucker and enjoy hauling, that's also present, with honestly a better system than the one that's in the main game, replacing courier contracts with the interstellar delivery system that's built directly into the market, allowing you to buy items and order them to be delivered to you by another player with just a few clicks, without the possibility of being scammed on both ends, as the delivery containers can't be opened and no collateral can be required. Being a pure trader and playing the markets is also probably possible, although the actual market system is heavily simplified compared to what I'm used to in order to be readable and usable on a phone screen. The only playstyle that isn't really present is that of exploration, with no probing system currently being implemented in the game. So whilst you can do something similar by running around nullsec and trying to cherry pick rare spawns, you can't fly an Astera around and hack stuff. In fact, the Sisters of Eve line have a completely different purpose in EVE Echoes, being kind of combat haulers, getting bonuses to cloaking but also to drones, armor HP, and cargo hold. So that's all of the major things that you can actually do in the game. Now let's get on to something that's a little more touchy, and I'm sure something that will help determine whether or not you decide to invest your time into it. How EVE Echoes is monetized. In many ways, it's, again, fairly similar to the way that EVE Online is monetized, primarily through a subscription system, but with additional cosmetic purchases also being present. The difference, however, is that the subscription system in Echoes is tiered. If you're playing for completely free, you're in a state that's similar to the alpha state, with a lower training speed and some restrictions on what you can do. The main one that you'll run into is that you can't set up your own sell orders as an alpha, meaning that you have to dump your loot to other players' buy orders or reprocess it for minerals. Although, as far as I can tell, there isn't a progression cap in Echoes like there is in the PC version for alphas. Then you have Basic Omega, which increases your training speed slightly and removes all of the alpha restrictions, costing £4.49 a month. Standard Omega, which increases your training speed by a larger amount and costs £11.99 a month. And finally, Duo Omega, which is born from having both a basic and standard subscription at once, which fully doubles your training speed and costs $14.49 a month. On top of this, there's also an equivalent to the skill trading system, although involving no player interaction, in the cognitive neuroscience implants, which give you a permanent boost to your training speed. Plex, the currency which can be used to purchase a subscription or these implants, does trade freely on the market though, meaning that you can exchange real money for ISK or use your ISK to buy a subscription if you want to, just like in the main game. And that leads us on to the big, blunt question that I know you guys would all ask me in the comments if I didn't directly address. is EVE Echoes pay to win? I think the answer to that is, do you think that EVE Online is pay to win? The monetization system present is pretty much the exact same as most modern MMOs, just ported to a mobile platform. As far as I can tell, there's no golden ammo, no premium ships that can only be bought with fat stacks of cash, and shockingly not even any loot boxes you can buy. The only ones in the game are those you get as rewards for playing and going through the tutorial. But paying for a subscription definitely does give you an advantage, especially given that the non-linear skill system that I commented on in the last video remains in place. So having a skill at level 4 to 5 is often much more powerful than having it at level 3, rather than just being an extra few percent to a specific stat. For example, Small Railgun Upgrade 3 gives you a 9% boost to damage and an 8% boost to fall off. Small Railgun Upgrade level 4 gives you a 12% damage boost, a 12% fall off boost, and a 10% optimal range boost. This means that SP is much more valuable a resource than it is in the PC version, which increases the importance of having a subscription in the first place. Personally, I'm fine with all this because, as I said, it's the system I'm used to, and paid for the standard subscription, but I think it's important to fully explain all of this out so that you, the listener, can make an informed decision. And also, this isn't something that most reviews are going to talk about, so why not? Ultimately, I've really enjoyed my first week or so playing the game, even whilst I've stayed completely solo to get an authentic, kind of casual viewpoint on it, and cut out the social elements which make regular EVE so interesting to me. And also so that I could run into every mechanic completely blind and get the experience of, playing EVE for the first time again. And what that's left me with is the feeling that EVE Echoes is very close to 2007 pre-Revelations 2 EVE. There's no real SOV system, there's no capital ships, there's no mega coalitions dominating the map, all of the mechanics are still somewhat mysterious, and the game hasn't been optimized enough for there to be a right way to play it yet. And given how early in the game's life cycle it is right now, everyone's on an almost even footing. Basically, all of the most common complaints that more casual gamers have about EVE have been excised from EVE Echoes, making it much more approachable as a product. Echoes also demands a lot less attention than EVE, with many of the more tedious, repetitive aspects of the game being automated for you. Your autopilot always warps at 0, meaning that travelling from system to system is fast and easy, locking up all of the targets that you can see is as easy as clicking a button, and recycling your guns is done automatically as long as you have something locked. Hell, I've been grinding encounters whilst writing this script, rather than ratting in the main game, which I think says something. I do plan to join up with a corporation fairly soon, and if Echoes ends up developing politics and wars that are similar to that of the main game, you can bet your ass that I'll give it coverage from time to time. If you think that your group is going to be the one to take over this game, feel free to tell me about it in the comments, as I think it would be awesome to document this super early period in the game's history. Lord knows that we've lost a lot from the earliest days of EVE Online. Alright, well, I hope you found this review interesting and informative. If you did and want to hear more about this and other CCP related content, please feel free to click that red subscribe button down below. Or don't, it's a free country. Until next time, have a good day and fly smart.